So I've come up with a lot of crazy Marvel theories over the years, but this one might be the craziest one yet. It has to do with the Avengers and the coming retcon that I'm basically convinced is what the whole deal is with RDJ's Dr. Doom and RDJ's Tony Stark. And so I will have to explain that a bit in this video. A lot of you already know what I'm talking about with that. But what's crazy about it is I've started to hear some really weird stuff behind the scenes that it's possible that Tony Stark was not the only character in the Sacred Timeline, and maybe not even the only character among the Avengers whom is not who we think they are, and in fact may well have been a villain in the Prime Universe timeline. And if you're like, what the fuck? What is he saying? Don't worry. I'm gonna explain it. It's actually gonna be really, really fun. First, let's talk about the Tony Stark thing. Again, I'm gonna try to make this as quick as possible because many of you already know what I'm talking about. I have made a ton of videos about this. Basically, there's a lot of evidence mounting that they're going to retcon the character of RDJ's Dr. Doom from the Infinity Saga, and they're going to make it so he's not actually Tony Stark, and in fact, he was a Victor Von Doom variant that He Who Remains had written a story for that would take Victor away from his actual identity and maybe getting into magic and all of that sort of stuff, and instead would have him adopted by the Starks and raised in a family that was basically into industry and technology, and therefore Victor Von Doom would grow up as Iron Man. Now, I've made plenty of videos and talked a lot on stream about why I think this is. There's a ton of reasons. There's a lot of evidence, and the trailer for Doomsday seems to be coming out very, very soon, and that trailer I think is gonna basically push people over the edge of believing this theory, as it is rumored that Dr. Doom is going to talk about this eternal prison that he has been trapped in forever in the trailer. I'm kind of thinking after we see that trailer, a lot of people are going to see the light of the theory and be like, whoa, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe Tony was a Victor Von Doom variant. But as I was saying before, I'm starting to hear that there are other characters that were fake on the Sacred Timeline, and I guess that would actually make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, if Victor Von Doom was taken and twisted because Kang didn't want him to become Victor Von Doom, then you would believe there's other characters out there within Marvel that Kang would have done the same thing to, because although Victor is incredibly powerful and certainly maybe one of the most threatening villains in all of Marvel, there are other villains that are more powerful. There are other villains that are even more evil, like for instance Apocalypse. And we do know that mutants for the most part have been removed from the Sacred Timeline, and we saw on the Moon Knight show that there was some iconography for In Saba Nur, but we don't know anything about Apocalypse in the 616, likely because Kang manipulated that so that In Saba Nur would never actually manifest in the same way. So now let me explain what I was told by a source behind the scenes, and just remember, this is kind of like unverified information. This isn't one of my best sources ever, so I'm not coming out to confirm this, but I do believe this person. And basically this person told me that a lot of the characters from 616 and the X-Men universe are going to be proven to be false. Tony Stark is false. He's not actually Tony Stark, but neither is Scott Lang. He's not actually Ant-Man. He's not actually Scott Lang. I've been told that Rhodey is not actually Rhodey, which is good because they fucked that character up with Secret Invasion anyway. But I've also been told that a lot of the Fox X-Men are not actually the X-Men characters. And to be honest with you, I don't fully understand what all of that means.
Why?
Okay, because you would think this person has the mutation, they have the X gene, they become the version, but maybe what he's saying is they're not the Prime version. They're not the real version from the old Prime universe, which I guess I should explain. Some of you are probably like, what the hell does he mean by the Prime universe? Well, right now it's basically confirmed that the version of 616 that we've been watching since Iron Man 1 all the way to Endgame was a false reality. It was a reality created by He Who Remains, who reshaped reality and wrote a script for everything after winning a multiversal war. Now, we never really knew what the version of the universe was like before that multiversal war, but Alex Perez from the Cosmic Circus has suggested that there's an idea Marvel has to refer to this as the Prime Universe. And an extension of that would be there's possibly characters that were taken into other universes and had their memories rearranged. It's also possible that many of the variants of the Prime Universe characters do somewhat have a connection and memories to their actual Prime version. But regardless of the things we don't know about it, the things we do know about it sort of recontextualize this whole Tony Stark RDJ Iron Man thing. Because the thought I've had for a long time is that Tony Stark of 838 may well have been an exact version of the Tony Stark we know from 616, because those universes seem very similar, at least the Stephen Strange's did. And maybe in 838, because Stephen Strange came in so much earlier into the timeline, maybe that allowed Tony Stark to tap into magic or find something out about himself or the multiverse before the Tony Stark of 616. It is possible that Tony Stark realized that he is actually a Victor Von Doom variant and then became something between Iron Man and Doctor Doom, embracing magic and embracing technology. It is worth noting that the Ultron bots from that reality have energy. It is also worth noting that the Baxter Foundation within 838 was cataloging the multiverse and was actively using magic and science together. Remember those handcuffs? Those used the sand of, I forget what the fuck the sand was, but they use magical sand combined with Baxter building technology to create handcuffs that can keep sorcerers from doing magic. Okay, I think you kind of get what I'm saying about RDJ and Tony Stark and all of that. But here's the next question, and this is where the theory that I want to talk about in this video gets very interesting, right? So if Scott Lang is fake, and if Rhodey is fake, is it possible other characters are fake? Is it possible almost all of the Avengers are fake? Now, I'm actually going to connect this to Steve Rogers and Captain America, because there's an element of Steve's story here that I think is really central to understand what might have happened. But I am reminded of a scene in Loki season 1 where Loki's being put on trial for crimes against the timeline, and Loki literally asks, well, what about the Avengers? They were messing with time, and the judge replies the Avengers were supposed to do that, meaning that had actually been curated by He Who Remains. He was comfortable with everything that happened in the Infinity Saga and everything that was leading into Loki season 1. And we kind of have to ask ourselves why. Like, why would he be doing that? And if you add in the element of what He Remains was doing with Tony Stark, meaning he took Victor Von Doom and turned him into Iron Man, I want you to really think about why you would do that beyond just trying to torture Victor Von Doom. And I think the answer is because Kang wanted a version of the Avengers. Now, this connects to Avengers Forever, the one from the 90s, but also the one from the 2010s, or I think it was 2012, 2015 time. In both of those stories, Kang in different timelines is either working with the Avengers, he's either gathering his own team of Avengers, or he is fighting against other Kangs that have teams of Avengers. That's like something that keeps happening. And if you think about it, what was the expressed purpose of Loki on the sacred timeline? The timeline that Kang was manipulating. It was that Loki was to lose, that Loki was to pull out the best of these different characters. And so it's very obvious that the Avengers were being built up likely for a purpose. I mean, if it was eventually going to come to universe versus universe in another multiversal war, then wouldn't He Who Remains prepare for that by making the most powerful version of the Avengers that he could? Oh, and here's the other side of that. I think Kang would also want to create a version of the Avengers out of villains. Why? Well, because I could see the perspective from Kang being that the heroic elements of the Avengers is actually their weakness. And in a way, he's right. If you did really and truly have a Dark Avengers, and yes, this is kind of expressed during the Norman Osborn Siege stuff in Marvel Comics, but we've seen other versions of this as well, either through the Cataclysm event or even in the Exiles, you can find other groups of Dark Avengers, or even in Hickman's Time Runs Out, as we see, you know, the Squadron Supreme in another universe, or Avengers that are very evil in this other universe. It is fair to say that a villainous group of Avengers would be a very powerful force. And it almost feels like this fanboy thing where you're grabbing up your own version of the Avengers, but you needed to make them cooler, darker, more powerful, or villains. And yeah, I mean, I would say taking Doctor Doom, turning him into Iron Man, like that secures you an incredibly powerful Iron Man, and an Iron Man that's willing to cross lines and do all sorts of stuff, which to be fair, our Tony Stark did. And think about Natasha. Think about Hawkeye. These are literal villains that do get recruited ultimately by S.H.I.E.L.D., but it's not actually S.H.I.E.L.D. that turns them into good people. And they were arguably, even throughout a lot of the Infinity Saga, not exactly all that heroic. Well, what if these are actually dark variants of those characters? We talk about our Hulk, and it feels very similar. I mean, I know Hulk kind of became a laughingstock since Infinity War and Endgame and the whole smart Hulk thing, but before that, Hulk was savage, Hulk was troubled, Hulk tried to self-delete, Hulk was doing all sorts of wild stuff. This is actually a pretty dark version of Hulk. Think about Thor, our Thor, going through the same stuff. I mean, yes, in some ways he's just the regular Thor we know from the comics. He's prideful, he's sort of wayward, right? He doesn't know what he even really wants. But that first movie shows an absolute savage warrior prince that's out of fucking control. And so what my theory is we might come to understand that He Who Remains created a dark version of the Avengers, and the Avengers we followed throughout the entire Infinity Saga were not who we thought they were. And in fact, that entire story, that entire sequence, everything that was written by He Who Remains was grabbing up villainous characters or very dangerous characters, putting them into the role of the heroic Avengers in order to create a contingency plan in case there was another multiversal war. However, there's one thing within this entire system, script, writing, TVA, manipulation, sacred timeline thing that I don't think Kang could actually have control of, and that is Steve Rogers. And this does kind of connect to some new reports about Doom really wanting Steve Rogers and feeling as though Steve Rogers is really important to stopping, and like maybe if he stops Steve Rogers, he stops the multiverse from collapsing. And I can't stop thinking about how Steve Rogers is something like the beating heart of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he's actually the moral compass that allows all of the characters around him to become heroic. I mean, it's so on display in Endgame, his conversations with the different characters, including Natasha mostly. It's just so obvious that like he was the rock that brought everybody back. There are even rumors that Steve Rogers will essentially be going around the multiverse, perhaps with Chris Hemsworth Thor, and recruiting variants of himself and of Thor to ultimately form the multiversal Avengers and fight against Doom at the end of time. And I think the truth is that character of Steve Rogers, I think will be considered so important and so immalleable that he is a function that just remains in all of these timelines. It's even possible that Kang couldn't really do much as far as replacing Steve Rogers and trying to get that out of the timeline. Maybe that's a fixed moment in time sort of situation. Maybe in 838, Steve Rogers never gets found in the ice, and maybe therefore we get Captain Carter, and maybe therefore there is no counterweight to the darkness of RDJ's Tony Stark or Victor Von Doom in that universe. And when he discovers it, he goes a really dark way, and there's nobody there to center him. And maybe this connects to season 1 of Loki, where it seems like the TVA brings Peggy Carter in. Maybe this connects to all the sort of rumors about Steve Rogers and his involvement on the sacred timeline after Endgame, and the life he lived with Peggy and their potential children. There's just like a lot going on here. But with all that said, and I know it's kind of chaotic, this is kind of like a stream of consciousness theory at this point. Like I literally just thought of this morning, and I was like, fuck it, let's throw the camera on. I can't shake this feeling that maybe there were other characters among the Avengers that were actually dark figures. They were villainous figures, and maybe Kang or He Who Remains assembled them intentionally. And maybe the reason Victor wants Steve Rogers is because he can create a branch timeline in which there is no Steve Rogers, and all of those characters sort of just go back to their more villainous ways and become a dark Avengers group that then he can utilize in his conquest of the multiverse. I don't know, man. I'm just spitballing here, having fun, speculating. I'm so pumped that speculation is back in the Marvel community. Doomsday and Secret Wars are holding a lot of promise and have me very excited. They have a lot of the fandom very excited. So just wanted to talk about this crazy ass theory. It's very early days on this theory. I'll probably cook up different versions of it, but let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.